The National Prayer Breakfast is not some secret Republican thing. It's actually a good thing that Congress and the executive branch do. Let me start with a tweet from Jared Huffman, who is a member of Congress, a Democrat from California. He said this: Speaker Johnson's National Prayer Breakfast is yet another example of MAGA Republicans taking a sledgehammer to the wall between church and state. Walk with me to protest this morning. Here's the thing. That's not really what's going on here, and a quick Google search would have actually taught the congressman not to just say that. So let me go through the history of the National Prayer Breakfast, some of the controversy, which I think is very fair, just so we're more informed, right? I think one of the biggest problems we have in politics these days is people just pop off without knowing. They just say stuff. I'm not in the say stuff business. I'm in the explain stuff business. So let's start here. The National Prayer Breakfast started in 1953 by Dwight Eisenhower, who was president at that point. Now, Eisenhower had been elected in 52, and he thought, though he wasn't super religious, he thought, certainly not outwardly religious, he thought that the country post-World War II needed a spiritual rejuvenation, reawakening. And he was talking about this with Billy Graham, the very famous pastor. And Billy Graham urged him to do this, a National Prayer Breakfast. And Eisenhower was a little bit skeptical, but he did it. And there were 400 people there. And he sort of, he attended, and it was an event. I don't think anyone thought it was going to grow and last as long as it has. But it has gone since 1953. It used to be 400 attendees. It's grown to thousands of attendees. It shrunk back and forth. But what I would say is, yes, religion and faith are at the heart of this. It's also, candidly, a big networking event for evangelical leaders and politicians and senior staff. It just is, right? It's a big Washington event. And yes, Donald Trump did speak at it this year, but Joe Biden has spoken at it. And so has Barack Obama, right? There's nothing new there. So let me go through a couple very memorable presidential speeches. And I don't think Donald Trump's speech at this year's National Prayer Breakfast was terribly memorable, but let me go through a few. In 1964, it always happens in February, the first Thursday in February. So in 1964, Lyndon Johnson spoke movingly and openly about his faith vis-a-vis the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which obviously he was there to witness. He had not really spoken publicly. Obviously, that was November 22nd, 1963, so just a few months later. He had not really spoken publicly about it. And that one, I think, is one of the most memorable. Another one, 1969. So February 1969, Richard Nixon, who has won the presidency, speaks about how he thinks faith can inform America's effort to bring peace to the world. Again, history doesn't look great back on Nixon, but that's one that's remembered. And then the one I remember, the one that sort of sticks in my memory by far the most, is 1998. I was a young reporter. I hadn't even graduated from college, but I was sort of paying attention to this stuff because I was nerdy. And Bill Clinton is in the midst of the Monica Lewinsky intern sex scandal. And he goes to the National Prayer Breakfast, a lot of controversy that he was going. He goes to the National Prayer Breakfast and he asks for prayers and forgiveness. Sort of a big moment in that whole saga. Now, look, it began with just Christians, 1953. Eisenhower, just Christians. Now Muslims and Jews and Christians all attend. As I said, it is at least as much a networking event for both parties as it is a sort of like you're attending a mass or synagogue or something like that. You are, in fact, not doing that. Now, that said, there has been a lot of controversy around the event, and it's worth going through that too. So for a very long time, the main sponsor of the event was a group called the Fellowship or the Family. Now, this is a very secretive group. It's very hard to find anything about them. Very conservative. And for a very long time, no one really made a big deal of it. But if you're interested in the family or the fellowship, I would recommend you go and look at, watch on Netflix a show called The Family that details what this group did. Well, as in 2010 was sort of the first time that people were like, wait, who sponsors this and what do they do? The New York Times reported that the fellowship, which was the sponsor of the event, had ties to legislation in Uganda that would have criminalized homosexuality. I think, and by the way, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, which is a group, sort of citizens' right group, asked President Obama not to go to the National Prayer Breakfast that year because of this reporting. He went anyway, as did his wife, as did Hillary Clinton. But the sort of questions about the fellowship, the Netflix show about the fellowship or the family, that you can call it either one, led to, in 2023, the National Prayer Breakfast to break away from the fellowship. It's now an independent group that's run and overseen by Mark Pryor, a former Democratic senator from Arkansas. So what was happening is, as it became clear the fellowship was the sponsor and that they had funded a lot of these very conservative, particularly on social stuff, conservative things in the U.S. and around the world, more and more Democrats stopped coming. Well, now this is now a separate entity. And I wanted to read what the new foundation, this is sort of how they explain the purpose of the breakfast. Let me read it. I'm going to quote. Our annual breakfast is an opportunity for members of Congress to pray collectively for our nation, the President of the United States, and other national and international leaders in the spirit of love and reconciliation, as Jesus of Nazareth taught 2,000 years ago. Every president, regardless of party or religious persuasion, has joined since. All faiths are welcome. Now, I know there are still some people who will say, I just don't think it's appropriate that, like, church and state need to be separated. It should be separated. And I don't think this is appropriate. And I think that's a fair point. My point here, like, that's a fair, we can have a conversation about that. My point is what Jared Huffman, the congressman from California, is doing is he's trying to score political points by saying that this National Prayer Breakfast is the latest example of Republicans taking a, his words, sledgehammer to the difference between church and state. Dude, it's been around since 1953. Yes, it has had controversy. Yes, it has had scrutiny, and rightly so. And yes, there are fair criticisms of it. But the one that Jared Huffman made is not a fair criticism. I would argue anytime we can get a bipartisan group of elected leaders and non-elected leaders in a room where we can not just talk about what we disagree about, but also what we share, that's probably the National Prayer Breakfast calling. No, what we share are common values. I think that is really, really, really important and good, and something that we should praise, not criticize. Again, I understand why people want church and state separated. I think in general that's a very good policy, but one time a year, I don't think it's bad to get together to talk about faith, to talk about sort of the bigger picture, to talk about what we have in common as people, as opposed to what we differ as when it comes to the two parties. So I'm in favor of it. You know what else I'm in favor of? You subscribing to this channel. I need you. I need your support. So please hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Just hit it. Number 2, like this video. Give it the old thumbs up. It's easy. Just hit it. Number 3, comment on this video. It's for the algorithm, people. And number 4, tell 10 friends about this channel. We are growing. Momentum is all in the right direction. We are moving. I'm excited. I'm doing a lot of this stuff. I will be doing a live stream, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Friday, so tune into that. Make sure you subscribe so you get alerted to all the content I'm making, and spread the word. Word of mouth matters. I want to get what I'm doing in front of as many people as possible, and if you need to sum up what I'm doing to someone else, here's how I talk about it. I am calling balls and strikes no matter what uniform the batter at the plate is wearing. Make sense? All right, everybody. Take good care.